Welcome to the Museum Roadshow, everyone. I'm Amy Degerstrom, the director here at the Becker County Museum. And today we're going to talk and learn a little bit about the Lakes Theater. And the Lakes Theater sits, on Washington Avenue here in Detroit Lakes. Opened in 1935, so it was a really early movie theater in the history of our community. It was said to be planned 125 by 50 feet, that it was going to be very modernistic, quote unquote, 750-seat theater, so it was a big building. It was owned and operated by the Detroit Lakes Amusement Company, which was operated by Herb and Andy Anderson, a pair of brothers. And the whole structure was going to include not only the main theater seating area, but also a men's and women's lounge in the basement. They also had a stage in front of the theater screen that was said to be available for vaudeville shows should the need arise. So it kind of tells you about the era that we're talking about. The building itself was a large space, and it was actually the follow-up to the building that you'll see in this picture. This is the State Theater. This is one of the first theaters here in Detroit Lakes, opened in the late 1920s by the same set of brothers. So they were just kind of moving their way and buying and operating theaters around the region. State Theater sat about where Ginny's Boutique is. It's the same building on Washington Avenue today. And once they built the Lakes Theater, you can see this picture, which is the earliest that we have in the 1940s. It's got a nice big marquee, lots of neon, which again would be popular in that era. And it was quite a showplace, really. It had a big, open, welcoming lobby and all kinds of good things to see. And so we'll be going to the Lakes Theater to check that out, and you can come with me. We can kind of walk through how it is today and see how things have changed over the years. So we're in the lobby now of what was the Lakes Theater. We've got some beautiful original fixtures in this area, including the chandelier, which would be original from the early 1930s when the building was first built. This space obviously has been remodeled over the years. Now we're standing in an incarnation that was a sports bar at one time. But you can certainly get the feel of the theater space and that kind of welcoming entry to the space. And we'll keep going. We'll take a look at the original seating area, the screen, and some of the improvements, quote unquote, that were made over the years to the building as well. So now we're walking into the original seating area of the theater, which, as you can see when we look around, is in its kind of bar incarnation. But you can certainly also see the space, the open space, the kind of slope of the floor that the seating would have been on. That slope was evened out at one point to make it a little bit more accessible for people who weren't watching a movie. But as you look down towards the end of the space, you'll see where the original screen would have been. Now, again, a bar area. You can also see some of the original brickwork along the sides of the walls. This building, of course, would have been connected directly to the building next door. And so these bricks would have been fire bricks post-1914 fire, because everything was required to be built of fire brick after that time. And like I said, in the lobby, this one was built in the early 1930s, so this would have been up to code at that time. And fortunately, the original owners, or the later owners, I should say, kept some of that original brickwork. This building eventually, like I said, was a kind of bar and restaurant-based place. And so I think we'll walk around a little bit now and see some of those features that would have been in places like the Becker or the Bar 917, which was the last building that was here before its current remodeling. So in the later years, this building, of course, served as many different bars and restaurants. Many people might remember the Becker, which was the only smoke-free bar in the Detroit Lakes area in those early 2000s, late 1990s. And of course, as a result of the fact that it was a bar and restaurant, it did have to have an industrial kitchen. So you can see the industrial kitchen kind of peeking through here. Pretty typical one of its era, probably, again, 1990s or so. The mezzanine level was also added at the time that this served as a bar and restaurant. When it was a theater, that would not have been in place. So imagine this as a big open space. And of course, on the top of that big open space, if you were a movie theater, you'd have to have a projector room. So we'll go upstairs and take a look at that next. So now we're in the original projector room. The first thing you'll probably notice is this nice silver door that is on the outside. Old film was very flammable. It was made with cellulose that was coated with nitrate. So it gives us all kinds of horrible gases and very toxic things, which also make it very flammable. And so every projector room, as well as the storage space for any film, would have to have a fireproof door. Typically, projector rooms also had very thick walls for that same reason, so that if there was a fire or anything ever happened to that film, you'd have a chance to kind of contain it within that space and it wouldn't spread to the rest of the building. You'll also notice if you look at the walls here that they still have the original kind of holes or cutouts for the projectors. There are lots of them, which seems maybe a little bit strange, but again, in those early days of film, they hadn't quite figured out the balance of light and dark that would be needed to make sure that the screen was illuminated properly. So they actually usually had 3 projectors in a projection room. The middle one would have had the main film with the pictures on it. And the side projectors would actually have had a light and dark sort of lens source so that you could kind of balance the light to make sure that the film was projected properly. You can imagine that those early films also required a lot of work. So the people who were sitting in the projector booth, unlike now where everything's digital, would actually have to be moving, switching rolls of film. Especially the longer movies would have needed to have probably 2 or 3, sometimes 4 rolls of film for each movie. So there'd be kind of breaks or gaps in the action, right? We often think about in old movie theaters the cigarette girls and things like that. The reason that they existed is because you had those breaks in the action of your movie. You might also fill that space with things like newsreels in the 1930s, 40s, and up into the 50s and 60s. During the World War II era, the Korean conflict era, they did newsreels that would tell people about kind of duck and cover for atomic bomb protection, right? So you might learn all kinds of things while you're at the movie besides being entertained. These projectors were very big as well. They were cast iron. They had to move on rollers across the floor because of their weight. They would have been anywhere between about 5 to 7 feet in length when they were all put together. And we have a few in our collection. I can tell you firsthand, they're very, very heavy to move. Rather like moving a cast iron stove from kind of that pioneer era. So certainly being a projectionist at a movie theater was a very different job when this building was a theater than it might be now. So in 1964, the Lakes Theater actually caught fire, and the interior of the space was almost completely lost, but the fire department managed to keep it within the building. It was remodeled and reopened in its renovated state and actually operated until the early 1980s when the Washington Square Mall opened with its theater complex, which was just too much competition. And so it closed at that time, but it had a good long run here in the city of Detroit Lakes. So thanks for joining us and learning about the Lakes Theater today here on the Museum Roadshow. We hope to see you again soon.